This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Thank you very much, Rabbi Klein, for the warm introduction. I was going to say I've been speaking for Agad de Perka. I figure it's got to be more than 10 years. I didn't realize 16 years. Kanai Nahara. Kinoch Nafshe de Ravina. The Gemara says that when Ravina, the redactor of the Talmud Bavli, passed away, he was given the following hesped. The Gemara Moed Katan Daf Chaf Hey. Nosim leilois kayamim lemi shemesim leilois kayamim. Let us place night like day to the one who made night like day. Literally, let's eulogize this man night and day because he turned night into day and day into night. Simply, it means Ravina learned around the clock, so therefore he's deserving of constant eulogy. Nosim leilois kayamim lemi shemesim leilois kayamim. However, Rabbi Meir Simcha, this is printed in the very back of Chidushay Rabbi Meir Simcha. Actually, I just came back from Latvia, from the kever of Rabbi Meir Simcha of Dvinsk. Rabbi Meir Simcha was asked to be maspid one of the all-time great Gedolei Yisrael, Rabbi Meir Leibish ben Yechiel Michal, the Malbim. And Rabbi Meir Simcha says, what can we say about the Malbim? We can only apply the hesped of Ravina to the Malbim. Why were they maspid Ravina? Nosim leilois kayamim, lemi shasam leilois kayamim. Because when Moshe Rabbeinu went up to Har Sinai, Chazal asked, how did Moshe Rabbeinu know when it was daytime and when it was nighttime? So Chazal say in the Medrash that when the Rebbeinu Shalom taught him Tar Shebachsav, he knew it was the day. When the Rebbeinu Shalom taught him Tar Shebal Peh, he knew it was the night. Actually, this has halachic ramifications. People always want to know, am I allowed to say Tehillim at night? Am I allowed to learn Tanakh at night? Am I allowed to learn Gemara during the day? Is there a specification of when to learn different subjects? The Mishnah Brura writes in the Shar Hatzion that you could learn whatever you want, whenever you want. However, if you're able to, so to speak, schedule your calendar, where you learn Tar Shebachsav during the day and Tar Shebal Peh at night, that's the preference. But if you're sitting around at night and you don't have a head for a Gemara, and you want to know, am I allowed to learn Nevi'im and Ksuvim, or it's the daytime, and you want to know, am I allowed to learn Gemara? Of course you're allowed to. It's best, ideally, you want to follow the model with which Rebbeinu Shalom taught Torah to Moshe Rabbeinu. So technically speaking, Tar Shebachsav is reserved for the day, and Tar Shebal Peh is reserved for night. Comes Ravina, and Ravina redacted Talmud Bavli. Why is it called Talmud Bavli? He was Baval HaKol. He mixed everything. So even though technically, La'olam Yishalish Adam Shnoisav, Shlish B'Mikra, Shlish B'Mishnah, Shlish B'Talmud, says Rabbeinu Tam, nowadays we're Yotzei all Limud through Talmud Bavli because it's Balal HaKol. So what Ravina did was, he mixed the day and the night. He mixed the Tar Shebachsav and the Tar Shebal Peh. He took what was designated for the day, and he said you could do it at night. He took what was designated during the night, he said you could do it at day. So therefore at his hesped they said, Nosim leilois kayamim, lemi shasam leilois kayamim. We should eulogize him day and night because he's the one who mixed the parameters of day and night. Likewise, says Rabbi Meir Simcha, the Malbim was really the father of those who were able to show how the Tar Shebachsav and the Tar Shebal Peh are inextricably bound, that you can't learn Tar Shebachsav without the Tar Shebal Peh and vice versa. You know, it's very interesting. When we take an Aliyah, we say, Asher nasan lanu Torah sames, v'chayer lam nata b'soichenu. Says the Torah, Asher nasan lanu Torah sames is Tar Shebachsav. V'chayer olam nata b'soichenu is Tar Shebal Peh. Why in the world are we mentioning the Tar Shebal Peh when you take an aliyah to the Torah? The Torah is the Tar Shebachsav. It's because whenever there's a focus on Tar Shebachsav, we are very quick to point out that the Tar Shebal Peh is indispensable to the Tar Shebachsav. That's why on Monday and Thursdays we make a special tefillah. Yiratzim ufanecha Hashem Elokeinu b'kavosenu shetekayim banu Chachmei Yisrael. Why are we davening for the Chachmei Yisrael by Kriyas HaTorah? Because we just took out the Sefer Torah, we raised the Torah, V'zois HaTorah, lest you think the Tar Shebachsav has an identity by itself. We're very quick There's actually a Haggah from Rav Stern, one of the great Go'inim, in the back, written in microscopic letters in the back of the Gemara, who explained that's why we say the Sihiratzain after Kriyas HaTorah, to indicate that when there's a focus on the Torah Shebachsav, we immediately point out that the Torah Shebal Peh is indispensable to the Torah Shebachsav. Therefore, the Malbim is the father of those who were some Leilois Kayamim, who showed that the day and the night, that the Torah Shebachsav and Torah Shebal Peh are indispensable. You know, the Chafetz Chaim writes an amazing thing about the Malbim. Chafetz Chaim writes in his Hakdama to Likutei Halachos, which is basically like a Mishnah Brura, or actually like the Rif on Kodshim. Chafetz Chaim says that, you know, when the Gemara makes a drasha, and the Gemara says, Al tikri banayich ella boinayich, we have no understanding of how Chazal made that drasha. We don't know, why did Chazal say it? What do you mean, don't read it this way, read it that way? But it says it this way. You can't just indiscriminately say, you know, don't read the pasuk like this, read it like that. How do Chazal know to read it the other way? Chafetz Chaim says only a gadol like the Malbim understood the mechanisms of drashas Chazal. You know that the Malbim in the Hakdama to Vayikra set up 613 rules of grammar in Lashon HaKodesh. That whenever one of these 613 rules are violated, it's like alert, alert, alert. You have to be doiresh. Chazal knew 613 nuances of grammar that whenever it's violated, it's a trigger to make a drasha. So the Chafetz Chaim said only a gadol like the Malbim understood drashas of Chazal. The Briskers say there are three achronim that have the status of a Rishon. Who do you think they say? Obviously, number one, Reb Chaim Brisker. The Vilna Gaon, and the Malbim. The Malbim was an Achroin who had the koyach of a Rishon. In fact, there are psukim of Tanakh that no Rishonim have explained except for the Malbim, and the Beis Halevi says, Beruach HaKodesh. I'll tell you an interesting thing. You know, there's the Shidduch crisis. I want to tell you about the Shidduch crisis in the 19th century. Basically, you know, the canonists, they were drafting Jewish young men to the Russian army at age, I don't know, at young ages, sometimes younger even, teenagers, and sometimes 19, 20, 21. And the question is, what do we do with these young men? You know, they weren't really getting married at 18 years old. 18 was a little bit too young for them to get married. But if they wait until they come back from the army, they're going to be 28, 29, 30. They may not be religious anymore. They may not be Torah observant anymore. So there was a big debate. The Chafetz Chaim held that they needed to revert, that young men, they were going to make a takana, you know, to address the Shidduch crisis, that everyone needs to get married at 18 years old. The logic being, if the guy gets married at 18, he's tied down to a woman in a Jewish family, maybe that will keep him Shomer Torah mitzvahs. That's what the Chafetz Chaim held. And he went to the Malbim to get like a haskama. And by the way, the Malbim poured out his heart to the Chafetz Chaim because, like many great Rabbanim in Europe, the Malbim went from one rabbinic post to another. He was thrown out from many, many rabbinic posts. In fact, when the Malbim passed away, they could not make a matzeva for him because Reform said they will violate his body. And did you know that the Malbim lay for over 100 years with no matzeva? I'll tell you a story, a personal story. I have a personal connection to the Malbim. My grandfather, I don't know if those who are from Flatbush, my grandfather's a Rav in Pittsburgh. I just came back from Pittsburgh yesterday for 70 years. That's a very long time to be a rabbi in America. He came in 1951. He was a Talmud Muvak of Rav Menachem Zemba. Okay? So he had smicha before the war from Rav Shlomo David Kahana. He came to America. He was a rabbi in Pittsburgh. He never knew his father. He grew up as a Yasaim. He knew his grandfather. My grandfather's grandfather was the Rav in the city of Linshitz. Linshitz was Ir Ve'im B'Yisrael. Linshitz is the city of the Kli Yakar. The Malbim wrote the Malbim in the city of Linshitz when the Malbim was unemployed in between one Rabbanus and another. So my grandfather's grandfather was best friends with the Malbim. So my grandfather grew up. He didn't have a father, but he was very close with his grandfather. So the Malbim was, he never saw the Malbim, but the Malbim was like his adopted uncle. So he didn't go an hour of his life without talking about the Malbim. In fact, my grandfather's initials were Mardchale ben Yosef, Menachem, Malbim. That were his initials. Anyway, I ended up once in the Ukraine. I was speaking on one of these trips, and there was a miscalculation. So it was my birthday, and I wasn't supposed to be there. I was supposed to be home the day before. And I got a call from the tour guide that Rabbi Glatstein, you want to go? There's a new kever that they just discovered. I can't imagine. I'm in Kiev. Kever is not a Jewish area. There are no kvarim there. Yeah. I said, which kever did they discover? They said, you wouldn't believe it. After 140 years, they located the burial spot of the Malbim. This guy, Gabai, made a matzeva for the Malbim. I said, where is it? When he told me where the Malbim was buried, you wouldn't believe where the Malbim was buried. You know that when the Malbim passed away in Kiev, which was not even a Jewish city, Klal Yisrael was shaken by it, that this Gadol b'Yisrael, mamish like a Rishon, passed away in a Gentile area. So they called Rabbi Yisrael Salanter to be maspid the Malbim. And Rabbi Yisrael Salanter says, we don't understand the Darkei Shemayim, why the Malbim is buried here in Kiev. But like Moshe Rabbeinu, who's buried in the Midbar, opposite those who sinned with Baal Pa'ar, so that La'aseh Lavai Moshe Rabbeinu, the Rai Mehemna, will elevate all of these neshamas, the Malbim must be buried here for a very important reason. You know where the Malbim is buried? And later became the biggest Jewish cemetery in the history of mankind. He's buried in Babi Yar, where you have 100,000 people in the ravine, right there. The Malbim was randomly buried there beforehand, and the words of Rabbi Yisrael Salanter are mamish like a nevuah that the Malbim needed to be buried there. So just a hakdama to the Malbim on Sefer Rus. And the Malbim's Parish on Sefer Rus is called Geza Yishai. Sefer Rus is an amazing sefer. It has 85 psukim. Every single pasuk begins with the letter Vav, except for 8 psukim. These 8 psukim spell out, the Chida and the Shem Hagadolim writes that the 8 psukim that don't begin with the letter Vav spell out Yeshaya Beis Aleph Lamed. Yeshaya ben Avraham Levi. That's the name of the Shlach HaKadosh. Says the Chida, why would the Shlach HaKadosh be marumaz in Sefer Rus? Says the Chida, quoting the Seder HaDoros. You know the Seder HaDoros was Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi. Yeah, the Chida often quotes from the Seder HaDoros. A lot of the things in Shem Akdam are from the Seder HaDoros, although the Chida has one critique on the Seder HaDoros, that the Seder HaDoros quotes from a sefer called Shalshelas HaKabbalah, where all good Jewish legends come from, and the Chida says it's not a reliable sefer. He shouldn't quote from that sefer. But in any event, on our trip to Dvinsk, we went to Minsk. In Minsk, there's a stadium called Dynamo. Dynamo Stadium is built on the kever of the Seder HaDoros, Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi. Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi writes, quoted by the Chida, that there are 8 psukim in Rus that don't begin with the letter Vav, spell out Yeshaya, Beis Aleph Lamed, Yeshaya ben Avram Levi, a remez to the Shla, because Rus was Neskalgel in the Shla HaKadosh. That's what the Chida reveals. Can you imagine that the Shla had the soul of Rus? Rav Moshe Wolfson wrote a sefer called Sion Ve'areha, where he's doiresh why certain Gedolim are buried where they are in Eretz Yisrael. He says, why is the Shla buried in Tiberia? Because the Gemara Rosh Hashanah says Mashiach will reveal itself in Tiberia. And since the Shla is the neshama of Rus, and Rus is Imo Shel Malchus Mashiach, therefore the Shla is buried in the city of Tiberia. That's what Rav Moshe Wolfson brings, referring to this Chida in the Shem Agdam. Anyway, that's all by way of introduction. The Megillah begins very interestingly. We know Elimelech Chazal says one of the Gedolei Hadar. And he leaves Eretz Yisrael. This was not the right thing to do. The Rambam writes that even though you're allowed to leave Eretz Yisrael in famine, it's not mili de chasidus, it's not righteous. The proof is Elimelech and his 2 sons left and they passed away. So it wasn't the right thing to do. So why'd they do it? They were great people. So the Malbim explains that the Megillah is opening up so that we have an understanding at least why they did it. Why they did it. Vayihi b'mei shvoid hashoftim. Chazal b'mam lisasam say it was a generation that the people judged the judges, meaning weak leadership. When everyone's coming over to the rabbi to instruct the rabbi and guide the rabbi, so the people are leading the leaders and not converse. So there's weak leadership. Furthermore, this was in between the shoftim, right? So there was weak leadership. Chazal say, "La'olam hava mispalel b'shloimer shel malchus." You got to pray for the welfare of the government. Shel mole Meira ish Yisrael chayim b'loi. I know in Flatbush this is not popular. I grew up here. I know nobody can't make a shaberach for the government. It's not going to fly. But everywhere else in America, they're very into that. They make a mishaberach for the United States government because of the Mishnah and Pirkei Avos. Actually, I once spoke in Australia. In Australia, I couldn't understand what they were doing. They made a mishaberach for the King of England. So what are you doing, King of England? Yeah, it's a commonwealth. It shows a commonwealth of England. So they're mispalel b'shloimer shel malchus. Anyway, okay, I have what to say about that, but not publicly. Okay. So therefore, Elimelech had a problem. If there's a weak government, and he's a wealthy man, and there's hunger, then all the aniyim, he's going to go to shul. It's going to be 30 aniyim on top of him by Baruch She'amar, and another 30 by Mizmar L'Soida, and another 30 by... And he's going to be walking home, and they're going to be banging down his door, and their noses are going to be pressed up against his window, and one guy's going to break in, and he has no legal recourse to get his money back, and it's just not a tenable situation for a wealthy man like Elimelech to live in a society without a strong government. So the pasuk is opening up, at least we have a level of understanding of why Elimelech left, because it was shefayt hashoftim. There was a weak government. The shofet was weak. Vahi rav ba'aretz. There was famine, and he had no legal recourse to get his money back. I want to share with you, there's an amazing, the Ben Ish Chai also wrote a perush on Ruth. It's called Aim HaMelech. Amazing perush. Ben Ish Chai says something phenomenal here. Did Elimelech do the right thing? He did the wrong thing. It was an Avera, and he died because of it. But what resulted from his leaving and abandoning the Aniyim in the times of famine? What resulted? His children got a hold of Ruth, married Ruth. Ruth then is drawn to Naomi. Naomi brings her back, and then Ruth marries Boaz, and from there comes the Malchus Beis David. So even though Elimelech did a sin, he committed an Avera, from that Avera came the entire Shalsheles of Malchus Beis David. So you might wonder, really? Why would HaKadosh Baruch Hu bring about such a monumental achievement of creating the Malchus Beis David through an Avera? Aren't there better means to bring this about? Says the Ben Ish Chai, by the way, and Rav Moshe Feinstein writes this in a tshuva, that very often in history, great things will come to Klal Yisrael through a medium which you may question, and you may say, it happened through these people, but I wouldn't eat in their house, and maybe they're not even maminim, and maybe I don't agree with their hashkafa, so it must be what they accomplished was wrong. No, just the opposite. Just the opposite. It's not our job to make cheshbonos of why HaKadosh Baruch Hu brings about certain things through the shluchim that he does. That's his geschäft. If you're waiting for a diamond ring in the mail, and you don't hold of the UPS driver, yeah? The UPS driver doesn't have your hashkafa. He's not a mammon. So you're not going to accept the present? You're going to reject the present? What do you care? Rav Moshe writes this regarding Operation Antebi, where some said, well, maybe it was through certain forces, and Rav Moshe said, look, it was a nest for Klal Yisrael. Jews were rescued. Don't make cheshbonos how it came about. Says the Ben Ish Chai, from the opening of Megillas Rus, we learn a very great principle, that the darkei hashgacha is that in order, so to speak, to blind the forces of evil, because the Ben Ish Chai writes that whenever something great is about to come to this world, the Sitra Achra is going to try to interfere. So the Rebbeinu Shalom has to give what is called, we once spoke about this many years ago before Shavuos, and Agra the Perka, during COVID, when it was in Zoom, when it wasn't live, yeah? But the Ben Ish Chai adds to this idea. The Ben Ish Chai says, that's why the Megillah opens that the whole Malchus Beis David came about through this Avera, because this is the way the Ron Shem, so to speak, blinded the Satan. Satan said, yeah, go Gesundheit hate, pick up Ruth, bring her back to Eretz Yisrael. Nothing good will come of it because you did it through an Avera. And sure enough, that was the means that created the Malchus Beis David. Okay. Avada. So when we spoke about it many years ago, there are many stages of it. Yehuda and Tamar. You have Boaz, Yishai. You know the story of Yishai and his wife. It's a very interesting story, but not for now. This is a different topic. Yeah, many. And Loit, Ubenoisa, right? So every step of the way was couched in seeming impropriety. Okay, I want to go on to another amazing pasuk. This is one of the most famous pasukim in Megillas Rus, where Naomi is telling Ruth, this is not a good idea. You don't want to join us. Go back. Shoivna b'noisai lechna. I'm an old lady. I'm not going to have another child. And even if I have another child, until he grows up, go back. And the Gemara in Yevamos learns out Dinei Geros from all of the frightening mitzvahs that Naomi utilized to try to scare off Ruth. Naomi told Ruth, there's an Isser Yichud, there's an Isserei Shabbos. If you violate Shabbos, you chayiv skila. You won't even be buried with other Jews. And what does Ruth say? Ba'ashar tamusi amos. Where you die, I'm going to die. Where you're buried, I'll be buried. Kayasa Hashem li v'chayosif ki hamaves yafrid beini uveinech. Only death can separate us. Right? The expression, until death do us part. Yeah, this is where it comes from. So the simple way to translate the pasuk is Ruth is saying, I'm going to stick with you, Nami. Only death can separate us. That's how dedicated and devoted I am to you. The Malbim turns this pasuk on its head. Because the Malbim wants to know, how do we know that Ruth was a genuine ger? Maybe she converted for marriage. Maybe she had a inkling she would marry Boaz. Maybe she did it for prestige, for power. In this pasuk, Ruth articulates how sincere she was. Ruth says, I really don't need to convert. Just because I love you, Nami, we could still be friends. I could come back to Eretz Yisrael with you. I could be friendly with you. I could be close with you. So I'll be a Gentile and you'll be a Yid. And so what? What do I need to convert for? Says Ruth, the reason I need to convert is ki hamaves yafrid beini ubeinech. Death will then separate us. Because if you're a Yid and I'm a Goy, we could be together in this world. But as soon as I die, says Ruth, I'm going to go down to the nether world if I'm still among the Oivdei Avodah Zarah. And you're going to go Tachas Kisei HaKavod, and death will eternally separate between me and you. So Ruth says, the reason why I'm converting is Ki Hamaves Yafrid Beini Uveinech. I don't want death to eternally separate us. So Ruth here is articulating, I believe in the afterlife. I believe in Hashem's Hashgacha. I believe in Tchias HaMesim. In this statement, Ruth is articulating her belief in all of the great tenets of Yahadus. That's the Malbim interprets this pasuk. Do you understand? 180 degrees different than any of the Mefarshim. All the Mefarshim interpreted only death will separate us, and the Malbim interprets it. I need to convert because otherwise death will eternally separate us. Okay, here's another. If you take a look at number 7, there's a repetition here that very few even pick up on. Naomi, her name is Naomi. But she tells Ruth, don't call me Naomi. Call me Mara. V'atoimer aleihen al tikren ali Naomi. Keren ali Mara. Call me Mara ki hemar shakai li ma'id. The Almighty has been very bitter to me. But then she continues, Parak Aleph Chaf Aleph. Ani maleya halachti. I left full. V'reikam hashivani Hashem. And God brought me back empty. Lama sikrena li Naomi. Why do you call me Naomi? V'Hashem anabi. God, what does that mean? Anabi. He warned me. V'shakai hirali. Why does Naomi say 2 times, don't call me Naomi? The first time she says, don't call me Naomi, and then in the next pasuk she says, why do you call me Naomi? So why is she just being repetitive to be poetic? What does it mean, don't call me Naomi? And then she says, why do you call me Naomi? Says the Malbim a great principle. The first thing Naomi was saying is, don't call me Naomi. My life is very bitter now. Call me Mara, because of my current bitterness. Yes, beforehand life was swell, life was great, but right now, Mara, things are bitter. But then she iterates a very important point. She says, I know you think my life was good before, but now I want you to know, why did you ever call me Naomi? Why did you ever say my name was Naomi? Even when I was married to Elimelech and I had 2 children and I was living in Eretz Yisrael and I was successful, now I realize it was all to bring about a more bitter end, says the Malbim. Sometimes success in life is the biggest punishment. Sometimes success is a warning. Watch out. Because if you fall now, the bigger they are, the harder they fall. So Naomi said first, don't call me Naomi. My life is bitter now, although it may have been good before. But then she says the Malbim, a great principle. Sometimes HaKadosh Baruch Hu warns a person with success. We always would think, no, success means, the Rebbeinu Shem is smiling at us. Yes, maybe. Or maybe the Rebbeinu Shem is saying, be careful. Be careful, because you're on a very high pedestal right now. If you wouldn't be on such a high pedestal and things don't work out well, maybe you'd be able to tolerate it. But to fall from that great height, it might be a very bitter ending. Says Naomi to Ruth, now I realize that my life was so successful and happy originally, so that when the Rebbeinu Shalom would in the future punish me, it would be an even more bitter punishment. Lama sikrena li Naomi. Why do you ever call me Naomi? Listen to these words. Vashem onavi. When the Rebbeinu Shalom gave me success, he was warning me. No, the only peirush that even interprets these words, Vashem onavi. Ana doesn't mean afflict, because it doesn't say ina. Hashem ana. It was a hasra. It was a hasra. Okay, here's a great one. V'hinei v'yaz ba mi beis lachem. V'hinei. V'hinei. In America, we don't use the word v'hinei. Shalom Aleichem, what's your name? V'hinei Glatstein. Nobody says, and behold. Behold doesn't mean anything. Because we learn Chumash when we're 5 years old, so the Rebbe said, v'hinei, and behold, so we just get used to it, and behold. Yeah, well, every single time in the Chumash it says, and behold, you could take it out. What is it adding? What does it mean? So interesting, it's a very big topic in Chumash. The Archaim HaKadosh usually interprets the word v'hinei, davar barur ve'amiti, clarity of meaning. It usually appears, let's say, in a dream or in a prophecy. V'hinei anachnu malim, right? In the dreams of Yosef, in the dreams of Parai. Why does it say v'hinei? Davar barur, meaning this was not some fuzzy marshmallow dream. This was the Dvar Hashem. This was a Davar Amiti. That's how the Or HaChaim HaKadosh usually learns, but it doesn't answer most v'hineis. The Rashbam, Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky, say the word v'hinei means the following. And here's Av L'Kulam. Vayihi ba'boiker, v'hinei Leah. Surprise. It's a surprise. It was the morning, and the person who Yaakov thought he was marrying, it was someone else. Vayihi ba'boiker. But in the night, he thought it was Rachel. Vayihi ba'boiker, v'hinei Leah. Or v'hinei sa'oimim bevitna. The Rishonim say it was unusual to have sa'oimim, a boy and a boy. Usually it was a boy and a girl, or usually it was in full term or not full. V'hinei usually means surprise. So what's the surprise over here? V'hinei Boaz. V'hinei Boaz. What's the surprise? There are two surprises here. If I were to ask you, where's Reb Chaim Kanievsky? You know where he is. He's in the Beis Medrash. He's in Letterman's. He's in his house. Boaz is the God of Hadar. You'd expect him to be in the Beis Medrash. Nah, he's in the field. What in the world is this man doing in the field? He's the God of Hadar. What's he doing? He's harvesting. He's harvesting. Bittul Torah. Ask this question. Chsam Sofer, Chidush Chsam Sofer, Sukkah, Lamed Vav. Says Chsam Sofer, would you wonder what Boaz was doing if he was putting on tefillin? Why isn't he learning? Would you wonder what Boaz is doing if he's sitting in the Sukkah? He's working the land. It's a mitzvah d'oraisa in Eretz Yisrael to work the land. He's working the land. But it's a surprise. V'hinei, surprise! The Gadol Hadar is harvesting the wheat. That's one surprise. The Malbim alludes to that. The Malbim says another pshat. The Gemara says in Brachas Daf Nun Daled that they made a takana. Takana is when I greet you. The first thing is, what do I say? Was is nayis? Was titzach? What's flying? What's going on? Say shalom aleichem. Shalom aleichem. How am I allowed to say shalom aleichem? Shalom is the name of Hashem. Chazal say, don't say Lashem Karban, because you might pass away after you say the word Lashem. You can't just invoke the name of Hashem. Lashem Karban. No, Karban Lashem. So how could I greet my friend with the name of Hashem? Moreover, they're Masakin, I'm even allowed to say, Hashem imachem, Havayo imachem. Bayazu bezdinoi, hiskin, sheyeshoyel b'shalem chaveroi b'shem. Why? They had to. Because you know what people believed? There was anarchy in that society. The people were judging their judges. The people learned in the Beis Medrash and they davened with kavanah. But as they say in the business world, business is business. God is in the Beis Medrash. God is when you learn the Daf Yomi. The Rebbeinu Shalom is not out in the street. He doesn't care about how we conduct business. The reason why there was anarchy is because the Rebbeinu Shalom was not in their business life. The Rebbeinu Shalom was in their religious life, not in their business life. So they needed to inject the Rebbeinu Shalom in their interpersonal dealings, bein adam lachaveroi. Like Rav Moshe writes, Rav Moshe has a tshuva. Why in Elul do they blow the shofar at the end of davening? Shouldn't they blow the shofar maybe before davening to be ma'or you to daven well? Or maybe before you learn the Gemara, you should blow the shofar to learn well? Says Rav Moshe, you don't need hisoros to daven well. You don't need hisoros to learn well. You need to blow the shofar before you go to work, so you work honestly. Tekiyah shofar is for work, not for the Beis Medrash. So Boaz was masakein, that when you see your friend on 47th Street, you see your friend in the store, you say Hashem imach, oh, the Rebbeinu Shalom's in the store? So that's a surprise. V'hinei Boaz, surprise, you ready for the surprise? Vayomer el hakotzrim, Hashem imachem. It's a shocker. That was a shocker. That Boaz was masakein a new takana. Okay, here's a lamda shavart from the Malbim. Boaz to Ruth did not let on that he was interested in her at all. In her presence, the pasuk says, "Vayitzpat la kali." He sprinkled into her hand parched grain. He sprinkled into her parched grain, meaning, lady, don't expect anything from me. If you think you're going to marry me for my bucks, I'm not giving you much. Don't expect anything from me. He sprinkled into her hand a few grains of parched grain, but behind her back, he told the Kaitzrim, look at number 14. Drop for her from the bundles. Meaning, she was an ani. If you drop a bundle, she could keep it out shikha. So drop the bundles. In other words, it's really not shikha, but make believe it's shikha and she'll pick up the bundles. So she shouldn't think that I'm supporting her. So nobody should accuse her. If one day Ruth marries Boaz and people say, nah, she did it for the money, so the whole marriage is in question. So Boaz cannot let on that he was publicly supporting her. So behind her back, he tells the Kaitzrim, drop the bundles. But then the pasuk says an extra word. Va'azavtem, and abandon them. Why the double lashon? Shoyl tashoylu, forget it, drop it. Va'azavtem, and abandon it. Says the Malbim Agaoinas. Malbim says, what's the halacha if an ani picks up shikha? Does the ani have to give maser from picking up shikha? No. Shikha is pater min hamaser. The problem is, this wasn't shikha, it was fake shikha. Because the Kaitzim really didn't mean to drop it. They dropped it just to support her. So it's not really shikha. So Ruth is going to pick it up. She's going to eat it. And she's going to be nichshal and not taking off maser. So Boaz says, shoyl tashoylu min atzvasim. And then ba'azavtim, be mafkarid. And if it's hefker, it's pater min hamaser. I think the Brisker Rava also says that. This one is Oyem B'Naira. All of a sudden, once Ruth converts, what's her name? Ruth. All of a sudden in Perek Beis, look at number 16. Vatoimer, Ruth hamoyavia. Ruth the Moabite said to Naomi, Gam ki amar elai. She tells Naomi, Boaz told me, Im hana'orim ashar li tidbakin. I should hang around, I should stick with the young harvesters. Adim kilu, until I finish, is kol ha'katzer asher li, the whole harvest. So, Ruth is repeating to Naomi that Boaz told her that she should stick around with im hana'orim. What are na'orim? Na'orim are young, what gender? Men, young men. Is that what Boaz told her? Look at number 17. What Boaz told her earlier was, Vayomer Boaz o Ruth, Haloi shamahat biti, al telchi lilkoid b'sade acher v'gam lo yisaburi mizeh v'choi sidbakin imna roisoi. Hang around the young ladies. What Boaz told her was, hang around the young ladies. When Ruth repeats to Naomi, it just, so to speak, slipped out of her mouth. He told me to hang around the young men. But that's not what Boaz said. So why is Ruth misquoting Boaz? The answer is Ruth was not being careful to report it accurately because she didn't think that he meant it mamish na'aroisoi as opposed to na'arim. She just thought he meant the young people. Why wasn't she attuned to that Boaz was precisely saying that she should only stick around with the na'arim? Because she's Ruth hamoyavia. Because even though she converted and she learned Torah mitzvahs, she was not rogil yet behanhagas Yisrael, that were medaktek kachur asara, that na'arim im na'arim or na'arais im na'arais. So she reported it slightly inaccurately. The Malbim says, why? Because even though she converted, but she's still Rus Hamoyavia. So the Navi in this instance is the only time the Navi calls her Rus Hamoyavia. Before, after. So she was very genuine, and she was very inspired, and she may have been very educated, but there's another darga of being familiar with Hanhagas Yisrael Saba. And she wasn't used to that yet. She wasn't attuned to that yet. Okay, one more. This also, all of these perushim, you see how attuned the Malbim is, mamish, to the nuance of the wording. These are observations that the Malbim uniquely explains that other Mefarshim don't. Nami tells Ruth, here's the plan. You can go down to the threshing floor. Vihi v'shachvai. When Boaz is there. V'yadaris hamagam sheyishkav sham. Identify the place that he lay. Uvas, and you go. V'gilis margaloisa v'shachaft. You uncover his feet and you lie down. V'hu yagid lach esa shartasen. He'll tell you what to do. Many years ago we spoke about that this is reminiscent of another story of Loit ubenoisav. And the Mefarshim say, Ayin Ba'alshech, the Medrash Shmuel on Rus, the Ben Ish Chai on Rus. Rus was actually the Gilgal of the oldest daughter of Lot, and she needed to repeat what the oldest daughter of Lot did. Ayin Sham in that shir. Maybe they could send out old Shiurim also, right? Old Agar. Fine. I want to tell you what the Malbim says over here. What exactly is this plan where Naomi tells Ruth to uncover his feet? We know that the mitzvah that Boaz needed to do to Ruth was the mitzvah of Yibum. If someone doesn't want to do Yibum, the procedure is chalitza. And if somebody does not do chalitza, which means somebody doesn't take upon themselves to marry the deceased wife, what do we call the guy who doesn't want to do chalitza? Beis chalutz hanoal, the man who removed the shoe. What's this emphasis on the feet and the shoe when it comes to the mitzvah of Yibum? So one thing we need to know, if I ask you right now, where is your neshama? So people point to different things, their head, their eyes, their ears. Right now, your neshama is primarily tachas kisei hakavod currently. It trickles down here into this world until the bottom part of the neshama fits into the body like a body fits into a shoe. Only the lowest part of your soul currently is in your body. Sometimes a person has a premonition, something's going on, they have an anxiety, and sometimes the Gemara says, you realize something's happening. Why is that? Because the neshama of a person is currently in the shamayim. It's only the lowest part of the neshama that's in the guf. You don't live in a shoe. Most people don't live in their shoe. There's only the little old lady lives in the shoe. What does a shoe do? A shoe houses the lowest part of the body. Only the lowest part of the body is in the shoe. And even the foot, it's very thick, it's very coarse. The heel is very coarse. Because the most physical part of the neshama is in the body. But you need a body. Because if you don't have a body, walking around in this world, it's like a princess and you ask her to walk in mud, she needs boots. The soul cannot exist in this world. This world is too antithetical to the neshama without a guf. The guf is the shoe so that the neshama could survive in this world. That's why whenever there's a makom kadosh, shal na'alecha me'al raglecha, take off your shoes. Why take off your shoes? What that means is it's an analogy. Divest yourself from your connection to the guf. The guf is the shoe to the body. Says the Malbim, when somebody dies without children, the soul of the deceased is at unrest because he was not able to perpetuate. And he's banging like a bell in the almana. And he's at unrest. He's saying, could someone give me a body for my restless soul? He needs a shoe. And when one is makayim the mitzvah of Yibum, Yibum is the greatest chesed, because you're giving, the person who does the mitzvah is giving his body to the deceased so that the progeny from that union is the deceased, the Malbim says. The progeny of Yibum is the deceased. When Oved was born, Oved is Machlein. That's why when Oved was born, it says, Yulad ben Lenami, a child was born to Nami. No, a child wasn't born to Nami. Child was born to Rus. No, Yulad ben Lenami, says the Malbim. So Naomi understands all of this, and she tells Rus, he's the Yavam. You can't ask him outright. It would be audacious to say outright, be meyabemi. But you need to be merames to him. Boaz, our family needs a shoe. So you're going to go to him. You're going to uncover his foot. You're going to say, we need a shoe. We need you to marry Rus and provide a body for the restless soul of Machlein. But if you don't marry her, then you're uncovering your foot. You will be eternally known as the Beis Chalutz Hanal. That was the Oimek HaKavana, says the Malbim of Vihi, V'shachboi, V'yadad, Es HaMakoim, Asher Yishkav Sham, Uvas, V'gilis Margaloisa V'shachaft. Ultimately, from that union came Oved, came Yishai, came David. David was born on the Yom Tif of Shavuos. By the way, Mayav is Gematria 49. The 49 days of Sfira, Rizal says, we're overcoming the Klipa of Mayav. to the Leda of David HaMelech. So one of the avodos of Svira is to be Metzapeh to the Yeshua of the Malchus Beis David, which is one of the reasons we read this Megillah on Shavuos. We should taka b'zoicha on the day of the birth and the Yartzei of David HaMelech. Ben David Yavi V'Galeinu V'Hevi Yameinu Amen.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.